It's been 42 years since the founder of the Children's Theater Company and School was arrested, charged, and found guilty of sexually abusing boys at CTC. John Clark Donahue was sentenced to a year in a workhouse and 15 years probation. He died in 2019. Now, since then, we've learned a lot about some of the survivors, and some of that can be credited to filmmaker Norah Shapiro. Her documentary, Magic and Monsters, explores the emotional and the legal battles faced by survivors of sexual abuse at CTC. Well, before we start our conversation, let's take a look at the official trailer of Magic and Monsters.
The largest children's theater in the world, it turns out, is in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area.
Children's theater was a national gem.
It was the most magical, unbelievable place where things happened that you could only see in fairy tales.
Now I look back at it and I'm horrified.
There was a bunch of exceedingly bright kids, and we're brought into this professional theater, and we are all told we are special.
Arts courses, singing, acting, dance.
We are about creating sacred moments and magic.
Part of what made it so special is John Clark Donahue.
He was teaching us always, introducing us to art. Our minds were being expanded.
And then
I sensed this erratic energy for danger.
I heard the rumors about John Donahue.
Little nymphs of the Isles.
The Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension investigated complaints that students were being sexually abused.
Our love of that art is what kept us there.
You know, people started telling their stories, and it was just this like, oh my God, I had no idea.
You were looking at a tip of the iceberg.
Wealthy, influential people of positions were very reluctant that this investigation would go forward.
Denial is such an easy thing to choose.
There are indications that other staff members may have been sexually abusing children over a period of many years.
They didn't want to believe that this was many perpetrators, many victims.
I had told the truth. It cost me everything that was important to me.
Sing to me!
The things that happened in that room.
It was shocking.
Institutions make themselves complicit in the hope that these problems will go away, that these memories will go away, that this history will go away. It's a second wound.
The average victim needs decades to come forward. You have to be an adult to understand that your childhood was destroyed.
It could have been safe, and it should have been safe.
Survivors come forward because they want children protected, and they want institutions to change.
That everybody knew this was happening at the theater. Nobody did anything.
Welcome to Life Unscripted, Norah. It is great to have you here. And I should mention, we have met before, and I have a personal connection to this story, but we'll get into that later. But it's great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
So this is a big story, and it took a long time to put this together, this documentary. Why did you decide to do it, and when did you start that process?
It's a great question. I'll try to be succinct and streamlined. But by way of background, I'll say that I grew up in the Twin Cities. I grew up attending the Children's Theater Company in the days of all of the work of John Clark Donahue. And I think it was really formative in terms of my aesthetic and artistic sensibilities. I was a theater kid. My kids were theater kids. So I felt very close to, loved, actually, the institution. And was peripherally aware in the way that many people in the community were. Even if you weren't involved at Children's Theater directly, it seeped through in so many ways. So growing up, you would hear rumors here or there. I was a lawyer in my previous incarnation, and I moved back to the Twin Cities from the East Coast shortly after that criminal case that you mentioned was prosecuted. And I worked with and around many of the players in the legal system. And then later, once I was a mom, had a kid who, as I mentioned, was a theater kid and wanted to audition. And so even based on the little that I did know, I had to do a little more digging to find out what was in place. And then fast forward to really answer your question. A close friend of mine who's a brilliant, talented journalist herself, a print journalist, had been assigned the story to cover in the lead up to the first case, and what turned out to be only one to go to trial. And she did a piece for Minneapolis St. Paul magazine. And I'm blanking right now. I apologize. On the title, we can get that for your show notes if anyone's interested. And so I was deeply aware as she was reporting that out of what she was going through. She wasn't betraying any confidences, but just what she was going through, tracking the story. And then after the trial, which was when Laura Stern's case was the first one to go and actually went to trial, she called me one day and said she had been approached and asked about maybe writing a book. And she declined, but had suggested perhaps there might be interest in this as a documentary. And there was enough interest for me to get called to a meeting that I went to because, as I said, I knew about the story. And I knew how big and important this was. And next thing I knew, we were off and running. Quietly under the radar at that point because the rest of the cases were still in process.
I wasn't aware of that, and I guess maybe this is a good time to explain a little bit about my connection to the story.
Sure.
And it's very multi-layered. Yeah. I was also a student at Children's Theater School. I was there for 5 years, late 70s, all during this time. I know a lot of the people who were involved, who were there at the time. And we were getting ready for a big 50th anniversary celebration at Children's Theater School, or at the theater. And there was a private Facebook group, and I was part of that. And the days leading up to this, what was coming out on this Facebook page was unbelievable to me. Stories of people's sexual abuse. And I was always aware there was rumors. I personally never saw anything. And I was not abused. And nor was anybody in my close circle of friends abused. But when I went to one of our reporters, used to be in the news business, and I spoke to this reporter. He's not a secret. Tom Lydon, who was investigative reporter. I showed him what I was seeing, and essentially gave him a couple of screenshots, of which then he made part of the story, blurred out the names, and just put in some of the quotes. Well, what happened after that was everything kind of exploded, because this was right before this anniversary, and the story hit the news probably the night before, if I remember, and people were not happy. A lot of people were really angry with me because they felt that I violated that space of them sharing these very personal details, and I personally, I saw it kind of like this was a Facebook page. It was private. It doesn't matter. I ended up, a couple of years later apologizing to people who were hurt by this, because I felt that it was important. And I did feel badly that people felt violated and But I also felt that this was a story that needed to get out. I could see, and the more I was hearing, that, everything was kind of coming together, and that it was a story that was important. And because I understand that world, that it was very magic, and that we were isolated in a way, and we felt special. I felt very special, as that's how he treated the students, except for, of course, a lot of the young girls, which they were either Betty or Vera. He used to call us by either that name because he didn't bother to really get to know, us personally. So I understand that world in which a lot, these students were in. It felt protected. It felt like we were learning so much. It was artistic. It was creative, but it was also isolated.
Perfect classic breeding grounds for this. It's almost textbook.
Hey, I want to tell you about a product that I absolutely love. They are my Cozy Earth pajamas. They are just soft and buttery, and I can't tell you, I would actually prefer to wear them all day long. Now, I have arranged a 41% discount for my listeners, for my viewers. If you go on to CozyEarth.com and use the promo code AKLife, you are going to get 41% off. Just think about that. Not just pajamas, but also socks and sheets and pillowcases. Just be cozy. It's that time of year. And this is important. The 41% off deal with Cozy Earth only lasts until February 28th. So act fast. A lot of what I've learned from watching your documentary were things that all of a sudden came to me so many years later. And one was, for instance, a lot of the rehearsals went until midnight, which was pretty standard, especially for Tech Week leading up to a show opening. And, there were parties. We were kids were drinking. Now, is that a shock? No. But, John Donahue's proximity to the theater made it very easy for kids to spend a lot of time with him. And as this unfolded, it really was surprising to me how it divided a lot of people as well. People who were sexually abused and others who felt that the story was, there really was some pushback. And I'm sure you probably experienced that in like your access to the survivors.
Yes, all of that. I before I address that or respond, I'm sitting here kind of flipping it to my investigator or interviewer mode. It's funny, we're
yeah.
But I'm just wondering, what was it like for you to see the film, especially because it was a central, important part, turning point, hinge point in the plot of the film, in order to explain to the audience how and why this all came about. The point, just for your listeners so they understand, because at this point, the bulk of them won't have been able to see the film. I hope they will, and we can talk about later when that's going to change. But had you, right or wrong, people feeling violated or not, I don't dispute that, but had you not done what you did, that's what set the ball rolling, that somehow organically it emerged that this statute of limitations window had opened up, creating this opportunity for those that did feel ready and wanted to proceed that way legally with the legal system, to connect with the attorney who is, one of the preeminent child sexual assault litigation attorneys in the nation. The bulk of his previous work had been in the area of the Catholic Church. And that's why Tom Lydon included him in his newscast. And it was as a result of all of that,
I remember that all was happening
the
about the same time.
plaintiffs, that Laura and the other plaintiffs, including that subset that went on the journey of making the film with me, went on this journey, which was the lens through which we approached the film. It was through the lens of the litigation. And so I'm just, it's pivotal. It's huge. And talking about pushback, I faced pushback even, and we've talked about this at Q&As, like openly.
Right.
But I faced pushback within the subjects of the film who even didn't like the way I was telling that story, or that I was never allowed. I had to find a way to tell this without ever, I've never seen, for anybody who's wondering, I've never seen the Facebook, because it's still active, it remains a closed group.
Right.
And that
goes on, and I mean, there are...
And I've never seen any of it. I interviewed the people affected who are participating in the film about it. And thank God I had that newscast, parts of which are included excerpts in the film. But yes, I mean, I even had pushback on that because it was such a tender, sore subject. I'm just curious what that must have been like for you, watching that all unfold. I mean, did you feel validated? Did you learn anything new?
No. I think that and I'm certainly hardly the victim in this. I'm not at all. But when I gave that information to Tom, which was, truly, he's sitting at my desk. I called him over. He's kind of looking over my shoulder, and we're looking at the threads and understanding what's happening here, what's taking place. I received very strong words from people about how dare I, and that I in children's theater school it was beloved. It was also great training. It was a lot of good things. So I mean that's a separate thing altogether.
Yeah.
That experience, and it was a nationally known theater. It did great work. Still is.
Yeah.
And so he was a beloved character, as were plenty of others in that theater who were teachers. And it was an incredible learning experience as a performer, that those skills helped me down the road. But people were angry at me, and I got it. I had plenty of people online who said what they had to say, and some people to this day who don't want to talk to me. They don't want me to have anything to do with this, my name, anything. But I mean, I think, you've done a fantastic job of kind of capturing, the vulnerability. And obviously a big part of that is this whole legal battle too.
Right.
Unfolding. It was very difficult there were files and pictures. And how did you get to all of that information?
That's also a great question. First, I just want to say, in response to your last comment, these are, without purporting to speak for anybody, which I don't. I mean, that's, with my films, I make documentaries, they speak for themselves. I don't use voiceover, I don't use narration as a rule. That's really important to me. That said, I've observed a lot in the making of this film and in the aftermath, and learned a lot about trauma and people who've been harmed. And I can understand, I can really, and all of this is to say, I can really understand why people would have been so triggered by that. And at the same time, I have enough distance, and said repeatedly as we were hashing this out internally, because I committed to a trauma-informed approach in making the film, which meant we had flow back and forth all along the way. And I had to earn the trust. This does in some ways answer, how did I get access to what I got access to? And so part of that, when we were sort of dusting it up about how this part was going to be handled, I did repeatedly point out, and I stand by it, which is like, yes, I see why you felt violated and harmed. I didn't know it was you at that point, which is so interesting how this all has played out. But I also pointed out, but for that, you might never have gotten to Jeff Anderson. You might never, within the short time period that was left of that window, learned about it, and you might have all been precluded. And none of what they've done that has been so extraordinary in terms of getting this story out and getting anything remotely close to accountability, or simply getting the opportunity, the platforms to tell their story after having been so isolated, siloed, shamed, and all the head trips that went along with that, part of what you were describing, just the atmosphere. And anyway, I could go on and I won't. But so it was a couple ways. So one, again, it was the gaining the trust of the people who decided that they wanted to be part of this documentary for this reason, to get this story out.
And like a handful.
It was a handful. So
not a lot when you consider.
Well, I mean, it's funny.
Well,
yes and no. I mean, it's a lot to do in one documentary to have that many principal subjects, if you will. So we had 4 primary subjects, characters, if you will, participants. People have different
experiences,
words for how they want to even refer in a documentary to the people that are in it, whose story is being told. But so 4 of the plaintiffs in this lawsuit, of which there were 17. And as I understand it, there are many, many more beyond that were harmed that either didn't know about it or elected not to or weren't ready or for a multitude of reasons that I don't begin to be able to describe.
The clock is ticking.
The clock's ticking.
The clock is ticking.
So, but 17 did. And of that 17, the ones who learned through channels, confidential channels, that we were doing this, and they were given the choice of whether or not they wanted to be in contact with me. So at that point, I think to this day, there still are a handful that have remained private, as in John Doe or Jane Doe. Some of those ended up coming out over the course, or at least, if not in the lawsuit, to me. But in any case, you know, I talked to a good amount of that 17, but the subset, the ones who wanted to do this and who wanted to really be deeply involved. So there are, I would say it's a sum total of, so there's the 4, and then there's a handful of others, former students, alums, some of whom were plaintiffs and some of whom were not, but they were friends or alumni classmates of yours and theirs. And then there's other people that I spoke with who either decided that they wanted to be part of it and then changed their mind and didn't, or other people who I spoke to on background, if you will.
Who didn't want to be on camera.
Yeah, or that I decided it just didn't.
Yeah.
In terms of telling the story. So that's A. And B, with their agreement, with their direction to their legal counsel, I was given access. I mean, that was part of my decision to want to do the film. And what was so special here is that I was going to have, and did have, exclusive access to all of that stuff that came up and out in the trial. So all the discovery, include, you know, exhibits and transcripts and video depositions. And then on top of that, we dug and dug and dug. And I had an archival producer who this is what she does. And she found, I mean, it was crazy. Who knew the documentary film observation of the hero, D.A. Pennebaker, who some of your listeners, I hope, know of, and if they don't, go look him up. Turns out he had done a film about John Clark Donahue and children's theater in the early 70s because he was such a star on the rise.
Have you ever gotten up from a great night's sleep, but then you look over at your pillowcase and you're like, ew, what's on there? Well, I have the perfect solution and a great gift for the holidays. They're called Copper North pillowcases. And what makes these unique is these are copper-infused silk pillowcases, which means they're antibacterial. They'll keep your pillowcase cleaner. Also, your skin will be glowing more and your hair less frizzy, less breakouts. They're great gift ideas. And this is what's perfect. They're also machine washable. So I've arranged a 15% discount for my listeners. Just use the promo code LifeUnscripted. You can find it in my show notes. Click on that link and you will see the Copper North pillowcases. But again, You still have time.
Deep diving into news footage from the time. And so we did all of that. We committed deeply and tremendous resources and time into finding that. So some of it, and then, some of those people in the film who were plaintiffs gave me access to things that hadn't even been part of the legal case. Personal mementos and journals and what have you. So it was a painstaking collaborative thing.
Mm-hmm. How long did it, gathering all that information?
Long,
years.
We started all of this in 2019 when, after Laura's case had gone to trial and had the crazy result that it did, but before the rest of them, before it was known whether they would or wouldn't go to trial. And we started then. Mm-hmm. And that was in basically the fall of 2019. And we all know what happened in 2020. The world shut down. That had an impact. On the one hand, we had all this archival stuff. So I was actually very busy working remotely, of course, and at that point, our editor was in the Bay Area in California, and I was here in Minneapolis. But we continued looking, digging, finding things as we continued to put it together, as we continued to follow the action or inaction or the journey that went on through 2021 and a bit beyond. And then we were still editing and finding what we needed and all the things that it takes to put together. And then we had a whole huge, we had to raise the funds to complete the film, and that took time. And we had an extraordinarily, I'll say the word grueling and careful legal review process. Mm. There's not an image, there's not a stitch of that film that wasn't gone over with a magnifying glass by our legal team.
And this is, you said this was your former life. You have a legal background.
Yes and no. I was actually a criminal defense attorney. I was a public defender. So I actually really understood initial criminal process. I did not do the kind of law that needed to be done, but I understand it, and I certainly understand. There were the legal issues that impacted us had to do with copyright and intellectual property kind of things, typical stuff, like when you can use something that you haven't licensed, and when you can use it as when you can just use it.
Right.
That's a whole area of practice. But there's other issues. There are issues about minors, images of minors, even if they're no longer minors. So there were those issues. There's questions of defamation. There are questions of privacy. So it was the most complicated legally film I've ever done.
Did you ever at some point go, well, you clearly have a personal connection and a desire to, the subject matter of people being sexually abused. You had a strong need to get this out. But did you ever think this is just it's so much work and that it may never come to light, it may never hit a screen?
No, I didn't think that. But I also didn't, I would just take, not issue with, but just to clarify the original. I don't have a personal involvement in this. I cared about the theater. I grew up on it. I loved it. I cared. I was a public defender, so I actually represented people charged as believe it or not, with child abuse. I have a strong interest in justice, and I have a strong attachment to underdogs and David versus Goliath stories. And the more I learned, the more outraged I was at what was being buried. So I was committed to that the more I knew, but I was already committed to the project. I'm kind of a person who, once I take something on,
get out of the way.
Well, I'm not going to say there's never been a project or a story that I started and then I let go. Not many, but this wasn't going to be that. And I just knew that the more I learned, I never, was it harder than I thought it was going to be? Yes.
Were you surprised at how much pushback that you got from the community, from people in the theater world?
Yes. And beyond, to flip it, how much pushback we would get in the larger community, not just the theater. One of the interesting things that I'll say that I did not, and I keep saying I guess I'm naive, like as much of a seasoned tough cookie as I think of myself as being, I guess I was naive and I didn't fully understand. And the reason I think it's interesting I'm bringing it up is because I think it's a continuation of part of what allowed things to happen in the first place, things to get so bad. I think is playing a role in the reaction to the film or pushback in this community. And I think it's worth talking about because I think it's a thing that also happens elsewhere and anywhere this happens. Anytime that you have a beloved, in particular cultural institution, but it doesn't have, in this case it's a theater. And, most people don't. I mean, you can't open the newspaper, turn on the TV without there being another story every day. The propensity with which this is occurring in our society, there's something really wrong. There's an epidemic, and yet there's this shame, and you're not supposed to talk about it, and this ick factor, and people don't want to talk about it.
These are so refreshing. I want to tell you about my new sponsor. You can probably guess right here. These are Aspire Healthy Energy Drinks, and what I love about these is they are half of the caffeine as most energy drinks. They're 0 sugar, and they have delicious flavors like raspberry acai, and this is mango lemonade, which is perfect on a hot and steamy summer day like it is today. And the best part, listeners of my podcast get 20% off of any of the products. So you can find them at aspiredrinks.com. Don't forget to use the promo code LifeUnscripted. That gives you 20% off. And this is an exclusive offer. So these are kind of green tea powered energy drinks. And I love them. And they give me a little lift in the afternoon without the crash. So cheers to Aspire.
When you have a beloved institution, it was magical. John Clark Donahue was the next greatest. He was. All that's
He really
true.
was. I agree.
He really was. None of it's overstated. It really isn't. I was there.
He was brilliant.
He was brilliant.
He really, the way he brought people in,
he was
the
charismatic.
kids, and he was childlike in some respects. I thought in the way that he approached talking to us, he just had a real childlike quality, but wonder and magic. And I'm not surprised at all.
But that also extended, here's the point, that also extended to the people who could fund and had other connections, the philanthropy community, the who's who of this Twin Cities community. And frankly, this happens in all communities. So it's a dark side, I would argue, that needs to be looked at. Because when people are attached and they give their money and their social connections and they derive benefit from being associated with this glittery, sparkly thing, being an insider, they especially, I would argue, in a youth-serving organization, they need to also be aware of what can happen and does happen over and over and over in youth-serving institutions, whether it be the Catholic Church, whether it be USA Gymnastics, whether it be the Cub Scouts, whether it be prep schools, whether it be this story. And that's why there's stuff about this story that's so specific and particular to these people and to this setting and to what exactly happened here. But there's also these things that are much bigger.
The restorative justice piece, I know that is kind of also a part of this process. I know
Absolutely.
we talk legally and suing and money, but it's a big part of this group came together and said, you know what, this is really important to us to get together and talk about it and to, essentially, have therapy together and talk about it and get it out. And it was it seems that for some of them, it was very helpful in their process.
Unlike a lot of films that have delved into these subjects and these stories, and they're out there, and some of them are really good, and some of them I have some issues with. What was different in this case is instead of stopping at the courthouse door, part and parcel of the film was to continue following them when litigation did not satisfy that craving, that need, that desire for the restorative justice, the shortcomings, the limitations, if you will, of the legal process. Not that they shouldn't have done that or wish they hadn't, but it definitely didn't satisfy what you're talking about fully. And so it's not just that was an aside. That is part of the film. That's part of the story that was so important to me to document, partly because what we, as it was unfurling, wanted the film or thought the film could do by capturing this journey that they were on, the subjects of the film. It could provide another way for other survivors who've had this happen to them.
They were very brave to step out there.
They're very brave, but to see that by coming out of these siloed shame, bury it, and isolate everybody, that is how people heal. And it doesn't mean it goes away. It doesn't mean, people talk about this word closure, and a lot of people hate that word. I never used that word. It's not in the film because there was so much objection. Well, you don't have my words anyway in the film, or even about the film. I don't talk about it that way. But I saw with my own eyes, and the film traces the journey, and you can see where these people were at the beginning of the litigation and this journey, and you can see where they are on the other side.
Oh, yeah, there's a transformation there.
There is, and to me, that is something that I think and hope can be, and that's why they did the film, so that this can be of help to other people who've gone through this. They, of course, wanted their stories to get out in this community, but far, far, far beyond, and to hopefully play that role. So that is what, and they continue separate from me. I am independent completely. The group of them, a subset, and some other alumni formed something called CTA Wellness to continue to do some more of that work. And that continues. Separately, when I say we, I mean my team of people, the filmmaking team, separately have a whole impact campaign for the film that we are in the midst of building right now, and really exciting things are happening to get the film out at the national and even the international level.
You've also made it possible for people, from children's theaters to watch this.
Yes.
And I think that probably as more people see it, I've got to believe that maybe some even 40 years later, whatever, might open some pathways. I do think there's healing yet to be
Absolutely.
that will continue on. And it was interesting to be in the position of knowing that story, working in the TV industry at the time, and I was not, and I think this was as it should have been. I didn't report any of it at all. I didn't even read a story. On set. That was the rule. That story, the CTC story, came out, and every time that story came up in a news segment, I did not read it to kind of keep neutral, even though I wasn't it was a long time before people knew that I had connection. People knew that I went to children's theater. They absolutely did, but they didn't quite understand how that whole thing kind of cracked open.
Right.
And the reluctance to tell the story was big.
Right.
Hey, I want to tell you about a product that I absolutely love. They are my Cozy Earth pajamas. They are just soft and buttery, and I can't tell you, I would actually prefer to wear them all day long. Now, I have arranged a 41% discount for my listeners, for my viewers. If you go on to cozyearth.com and use the promo code AKLIFE, you are going to get 41% off. Just think about that. Not just pajamas, but also socks and sheets and pillowcases. Just be cozy. It's that time of year. And this is important. The 41% off deal with Cozy Earth only lasts until February 28th. So act fast. You're from Minneapolis. You said you have a connection here. And you went in, you started being a public defender, and then you got into making documentaries, and you've made a number of them. And we know what's happening. Here we are in January 2026. The city is being attacked.
Under siege.
And there's under siege, and people are being pulled out of their cars, and over immigration. And it's hit the Somali community in a big way because of what was discovered as far as fraud. And you know plenty of people because you were following Ilhan. This was after she was elected state representative?
So the film, it's called Time for Ilhan, and if people are interested, they can, it's available on all kinds of platforms, Amazon Prime and Google and iTunes, all those things. That story, it's interesting. I actually started out to make a different film, or tried, and it wasn't happening. Nobody would talk to me. It was, and it turned out I had been served on a board of a community organization in the Twin Cities, and somebody was a fellow board member and became a friend of mine that way, was a Somali immigrant. Mm-hmm. I was talking to her about my original idea, and she was shooting it down, appropriately, I guess. And but then at the end of the conversation, she said, I think you should have coffee with my sister. And that was when Ilhan was just in the very earliest stages of launching her original campaign for state representative. So I described that film as a political origin, as her Congresswoman, mm-hmm. Ilhan Omar, right. The 5th District of Minnesota, proudly my Congresswoman. It's her political origin story. And I jumped in to telling that story, and as a result became pretty much more familiar with the Somali
I would think so.
In the Twin Cities, and her, of course. And that film ends with, Trump being elected and the Muslim ban, and then her decision very quickly on the heels of a last-minute decision by our now heroic state attorney general, also an old colleague of mine from my legal days and friend, someone who I'm honored to know and thank God have representing us as our attorney general. But he had been in that position, that seat in Congress, and he at the last second decided to step down. And we thought we were done with the film. We thought we were done.
I thought it ended there.
And then I got a call, I'm running. So we followed that toward the end of the film, an almost epilogue, and it was part of that blue wave. But it was when, the same day Ilhan was elected to Congress was the day that Hillary Clinton was defeated and Donald Trump was elected the first time, and started talking about the shithole countries and the original Muslim ban. Fast forward, here we are. To answer your question, there. In some ways, I have no words. We're all kind of shocked and blown out. And I was up until God knows what hour last night watching things unfolding in they shot somebody else a week after they killed Renee Good. We are being occupied. Ilhan, Congresswoman Omar, I call her Ilhan. Lots of people call her Ilhan. Continues to bravely fight for us. She's under tremendous threat.
It's become a very volatile.
Yeah, I saw her the day, speaking of this situation, her son, this is in the news, her son was pulled over. He's an American citizen born in the United States, but he fits the racial profiling. He and a friend were pulled over leaving a Target parking lot. Happily, at least in that case, I mean, that's an insult, right? But they were not harmed or hurt, and they got out of there without things getting rough. But things are getting really, 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 really rough here. Things are terrible. I guess it's funny. I have thought some about, how do we have this conversation in the middle of that? Or how do we continue the work that we're doing with the film in the middle of everything that's happening in the world? But there is a common thread about trauma. Like, we are traumatized here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Post George Floyd, we just keep being at the epicenter. And there's something, I feel like there is a connection about how we treat each other and how we respond. And about
there is
truth to power.
Since George Floyd in 2020. And, Melissa Hortman.
And
Annunciation. I live down the street from Annunciation. It's just coming everywhere. And there is a level of tension and anxiety in the city. And
palpable.
Right. Absolutely. And people, are worried to go out of their homes. I can't believe we're here. I keep saying that in my head. But we are. And
we are.
It's a very difficult time.
It's a very difficult time.
But I know one thing. We like to go and watch films and get something from them, a good emotional, kind of a release. And I think your film, Magic and Monsters, is just really incredible. And
Thank you.
It's going out there to the world to see, and it already has been. But if you don't, if you haven't seen it, you should, because it's an excellent documentary.
Thank you, first of all. Thank you. It means a lot. This is an amazing conversation. I've been interviewed and doing different podcasts from different angles, the legal angle and the survivor angle and advocate angle, and but this has been unusual and really, really fascinating and interesting. So again, thank you. I should note that we are continuing to do the film festival circuit. The film, but this is exciting, hopefully, for folks who want to see the film. So we premiered the film in April of 2025. This April, which if people don't already know, April is Child Sex Abuse Prevention Month. And we are going to be doing a limited time, so people, if they want to watch it, they do need to pay attention because it's going to be available for, not sure if it's going to be the whole month of April, possibly, maybe, but certainly several weeks in April, but then it's not that way while we're still figuring out screenings and distribution and other things. But it will be available then on a platform. It's somewhat new if people don't know about it already. It's called Kinema, Kinema.
Like cinema with a K.
And we're doing sort of some targeted and organization and institution screenings and partner screenings, virtual and in person through that. But this will be a situation where people can, just like they would go to Amazon Prime or anywhere else for VOD and watch the film. So if they want to do that, either they can remember this and then go online, but I would suggest that maybe people go to our website.
And we'll put that in the show notes.
Fantastic.
And for sure.
And they can then sign up, and we will send them when we have that link, when it's about to go live, so they can sign up and get all the info and the link, and then they can watch it. They can stream it at home the same way they would stream anything else from the comfort of their couch. And I mean, I will also say anybody that hears this and is interested, whether for your organization or your community, the in-community screening events that we've been doing are really extraordinary. You were there for the premiere, but that did have this talkback component. We had all of the main 4 subjects in the film came up and did the Q&A with me afterwards. And we had, very intentionally, the person who moderated is somebody who is trauma-informed and is a therapist. And we've been doing different ones of these, and they're really extraordinary. So for sure, if you don't have access to one of those, but if you're interested, people are interested in also reach out either through our website or through Kinema. People can set these screenings up in their own communities, however works best for them, with whatever virtual or in-person screening makes sense, and whether they want, to have me involved for a talkback or not, or their own community survivors, experts, what have you. So just want to throw that out there as well.
Yeah, that's very helpful to a community that you're doing that. So, wow, great conversation. I was really, I couldn't wait to sit down and talk to you about this, because being that we'd met before and everything that I know that obviously you've put out there on the documentary, it was just fun to kind of explore this subject, one that needed a lot of heroes, and you're one of them. You've gotten that out there. So
well, and you too. I mean, what you did was brave, and you took a lot of flack, and it played a pivotal role in this story ultimately being unearthed.
Thank you, Norah.
Thank you, Alix. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much for subscribing to Life Unscripted. Remember, when you purchase any item from my deals page, I get paid, and you support my podcast. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.